Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble! Fighting out of the red corner, the two-time Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And fighting out of the blue corner, by way of H-Town and Sac City, will be the AFC South champion Houston Texans. Yes, folks, we know who we're going to be facing in the divisional round. It will be the Kansas City Chiefs. And the question we're going to ask is, can the Texans deny the three-peat? And I went back and I watched the all 22 of the Texans and the Chiefs game, and I think that we can. And here's why. That game was not very far apart. We played them very, very well. So we're going to start with the defense. And the one thing that I did notice with the defense is they're very, very active with their movement to the linebackers. Their linebackers, Leo Chenal, Nick Bolton, and I'm blanking on the third one. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but they like to crowd them around the line of scrimmage. They like to do a lot of simulated blitzes. The defensive line is just pretty much going to be, George Karlaftis and Chris Jones. If you could get those guys blocked, you got a chance against those Chiefs. And in the secondary, we got to worry about our former safety Justin Reed back there, who's still a very good, rangy playmaker. He's got a lot of speed, covers a lot of ground. And, of course, Trent McDuffie and Juan Thornhill. So, one of the things I noticed is they did not get home with the pressure too much in that last game against us. Where they did get us was basically coming with defensive backs off the edge and us not picking them up. So, the Texans are going to have to work on their edge protection. And that's going to come down to C.J. Stroud, being able to recognize when that blitz is coming off the edge. And that's hard for him to do because the Chiefs linebackers, on top of being very active and moving around a lot, they also don't wear conventional numbers. They're like 32, and they're more like defensive back numbers instead of regular linebacker numbers. So it's hard to recognize the linebackers from the safeties except for, maybe their builds. So C.J. Stroud is going to have to pay very close attention, and he's going to make sure that he has to keep either a running back or a tight end and have them on the correct side to be able to pick those blitzers coming up off the edge. And the Texans will have a good chance of success against that defense. The Texans did not have a lot of success running the ball in that last game, especially up the middle. And one of the problems they had was they had Kendrick Green at right guard. I believe this offensive line is better than the last time we saw them. Blake Fisher has more experience at right tackle. We got Juice Scruggs at right guard. And one area that they did have success is that patented run that we've seen Joe Mixon hit all year long, where he goes one direction and then he cuts it back against the grain. And what the Texans are going to have to focus on mainly is just being able to seal that backside. Keep those guys contained with that backside pursuit by walling them off, allowing Joe Mixon to have those big cutback yards. The Chiefs' defense is also very, very aggressive. Their linebackers are not very good in coverage, so they can be exposed in coverage. And unfortunately for us, Dalton Schultz has not been a big part of this offense of late, but he was featured a little bit in that game. So Dalton Schultz could have a big game here if he could get going. And the main thing with Dalton Schultz is, he's kind of a volume receiver. You got to feed him a lot to get him going. And the Texans have not done a good job of that. Dalton, when it's early off and you're just getting started in the game and you just start throwing his way, he does have a tendency to have concentration drops. So the Texans need to get him involved early and often. And then, that game we also didn't have Cade Stover. So that's going to be another thing that will help us with being able to seal the outside and be able to get more runs going to the outside. And potentially using Stover as a H-back, being able to get him into the backfield coming up and doing some of the fullback duties as a lead blocker will be able to get us a little bit more going inside. Now, as to the passing attack, you know, they were having a hell of a time defending Tank Dell and Nico Collins in there. And of course, we know we're not going to have Tank Dell in this game. And the reserve receivers for the Texans have not been very good. We haven't seen much out of Robert Woods. We haven't seen much out of John Mechie. We have not seen much out of Xavier Hutchinson. So my hope is that there's going to be a little bit more of Deontay Johnson. Last week, Hutchinson was having to help him out, getting him lined up correctly. He didn't know the playbook fully yet. So I'm hoping with another week, he will be a little bit more integrated into this offense and be more of a threat than he was last week. He had 1 target and 1 catch. No, he had 2 targets. I'm sorry. And not much. But, Deontay Johnson, he has very, very good route running, very good separation skills. He's a pretty good threat underneath. The one thing about him is he's not really somebody that likes to run block a lot. And teams can key on him, and they could see when the Texans are going to be running because of the fact that he's just very, very disinterested when he's out there run blocking. So, the Texans, they're going to have their hands full, and especially with Chris Jones in the middle. The Chiefs have got plenty of time to rest, plenty of time to prepare. And Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the read when he has time to prepare. So he's had a pretty significant amount of time to prepare for either us or whoever it was going to be. I'm sure they were just basically installing some basic concepts on their offense and getting ready. And now that they know that they will be playing the Houston Texans, he's going to be going more in depth and coming up with some things. And looking at our offense, C.J. Stroud is going to have to be a lot better than we saw against the Chargers. There were some good things, but, the interception that was egregious. He should not have thrown that ball. If he was throwing that ball away, he should have put more arm on it. He should have put it higher where the defensive back could not have a chance at it. And C.J. Stroud is going to have to play smart in this game because Kansas City is not going to give you a lot of room for error. And the Texans were able to do that last game. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to isolate the linebackers in coverage. Get after them. Get receivers running drags and crossing routes. Get underneath. Attack those linebackers. Get them going side to side in coverage. Kansas City likes to play a lot of zone. So veteran receivers like Robert Woods, like Deontay and Nico and Dalton Schultz will be able to find holes in the zone and just sit in those soft spots in the zone. And C.J. Stroud is going to have to, be very efficient with his ball placement. There's not going to be a lot of room to error. They like to blanket the middle of the field with those zones and those linebackers. But I think C.J., if he's just patient, if he is effective with getting the ball out of his hands and making quick decisions, the Texans can keep this Chiefs defense on their heel. The key is going to be him getting into a rhythm, just that 1, 2, 3 throw. He cannot hold on to the ball. He cannot try that spin out move that he does when he tries to scramble. That's a college thing. That's something that a lot of offensive coordinators and quarterback coaches will try to train out of somebody because it's wasted movement. You're wasting that movement when you're stopping, and it's kind of like a basketball spin, and you go in the opposite direction trying to avoid the pass rush. And more often than not, it just leads you into another defender. When you sit there, you turn your back to them, and you start going to the opposite direction. The defenders often will not be fooled by that in the National Football League. So CJ just move within the pocket, step up, step back, climb the pocket, step to the side. Simple one-step motions. Allow that pass rush. They're aggressive. Let them come up and then step up past them and create your passing lanes. That is the key for CJ Stroud. Just feeling that pressure, reacting to it, not anticipating it, keeping his eyes downfield, keeping the chains moving. Don't force the issues. Don't go for the money plays. Don't try to hit them up deep. Work them underneath. Do it effectively and consistently. And that's going to open up things for this Texans offense over the top. Now, another thing that the Texans can do is they need to get Joe Mixon more involved in the running game. And they laid off of Joe Mixon against the Chargers in that first half. And they really did not run him as much in that Chiefs game. So the Texans need to get a heavy dose of Joe Mixon going early. Try to get him going. And then, look to run it outside those tackles. Up to that left side. Get it going behind Laramie and Titus over there on that left side. That was the place that the Texans were most effective running the ball the last game. Is up that left side. Another thing is Bobby Slowick. You got to get away from the screens in this game. You cannot go back to those. Last game, they threw 4 bubble screens. They were poorly blocked. They were not executed well. And the Chiefs were keyed into those. They know when that is coming. So you cannot go with those bubble screens. Now, if the Texans did go and run a more conventional screen where they kept somebody in and then allow them to leak out with the linemen and get those linemen in front of them, that is going to be more effective against this Chiefs defense than those bubble screens. Because Chiefs are too quick sideline to sideline. They're going to be able to key in when they're trying to do it. And a lot of times it's when they have Xavier Hutchinson and Nico Collins split to one side, they automatically know from what they've seen on the tape that the Texans are running the bubble screen in that situation. They like the big body of Hutchinson out there in front. Hutchinson's not a great blocker, but he does have a big body to be able to wall defenders off and allow Nico to get around him. So the Chiefs will be on to that, and they need to go away from that. Now, as to our defense, we were able to get some hurries and some pressures, but we did not sack Patrick Mahomes a lot. And another thing was the Texans did not play disciplined football. They did not maintain their gap integrity, and that allowed a lot of places for Mahomes to step up and take advantage of some running lanes. We saw him get a rushing touchdown early in the game against us. They need to have somebody out there spying on Mahomes at all times, keeping him somewhere in that pocket. Don't just rely on the defensive line. Christian Harris can keep up with him. Azeez Al-Shaair can keep up with him. As far as the Chiefs receivers go, Travis Kelce is not much of a factor until you get into the red zone, until you get into short yardage situations. He's an underneath option. He's not a guy that's going to break things over the top and get deep like he used to. That guy is now Noah Gray, their other tight end. And he is a guy that's been a big beneficiary of Mahomes taking deep shots, getting him over the top, working him in the red zone, in the seams of the middle. But the Chiefs really lacked a true explosive play. And one of the things I saw them do multiple times against the Texans defense was the fact they would run multiple receivers on underneath crossing and drags. And at that time, we did not have Azeez Al-Shaair because he was suspended. So it was Henry To'oTo'o. And Henry was responsible for the running back. And they would run the running back out of the backfield in the opposite direction of the drags and the crossing routes. And what would happen is Henry would run right into those. It was a design pick. And Henry was not able to get underneath that to be able to keep up with that running back. So it would allow that running back to slip out and get some big yards into the flats, running wheel routes and flat routes and such. So with Azeez Al-Shaair back and Christian Harris, who was also in that game, but he was just returning from injury, I expect the Texans to be able to identify that and to prevent that from happening. And then when you look at the receiving core, Juju Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins are possession receivers. The only really big play threat that the Chiefs have is Xavier Worthy. And they got the cornerbacks to match up with him. Now, the Chiefs offense will run motion almost exclusively all game long. Any play that they run, they usually run some type of motion. What the Texans have to key on, and what I seen in the All 22 is Patrick Mahomes has a tendency to look at his first option, and that's often who he's throwing to. He does not progress past that first option. He's actually identifying what the defense is doing at the line of scrimmage, and he knows which option he's going to based upon the defense that he's seeing. So he does not often look off of that option. He's going with the guy that he's looking at. So the Texans defenders have to key onto this. They have to read his eyes. They have to be smart, keep themselves in position, and realize that the ball's going to be coming their way if he's looking at them, and be able to get in front of that and pick those routes. Another thing that the Chiefs did that was able to slow down the Texans pass rush was they used a lot of tight ends. They would sometimes come out with three tight end formations, and what they would do is they would chip at the Texans' defensive ends, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and slow them down. And Patrick Mahomes just gets rid of that ball very, very quickly. So it would not allow those defensive ends to get home in that pass rush. The Texans have got to get something going to combat this. And I think that they have something. We saw some very effective play from the similar sets this last game with the Chargers, using a lot of those big formations. Jim Harbaugh tried to do that, and it was not very effective. Um, so the Texans' front seven in this is going to be key. And being able to get after Mahomes, get him to the turf, or hurry his passes. But Mahomes not going to make many mistakes. And unlike the last game with Justin Herbert, you know, Patrick Mahomes is not going to look like Justin Herbert when he's under pressure. He's going to be able to complete some of those passes. You may be able to get him to incomplete some, but you're not going to force him to make errant passes the way that Justin Herbert was. So the Texans are going to have to play very, very good coverage down the field, which they are more than capable of with Kamari Lassiter, with Derek Stingley, and the lack of really, truly explosive options. The only thing is, the Chiefs are going to use motion, and they're going to try to isolate whoever is in that slot and attack the slot, because they know that is the weakness of this Texans defense. And the other weakness is going to be trying to go after Eric Murray in coverage. Eric Murray was very, very good last game in coverage. His pick six really ignited that game and started to swing that momentum. But if you get him isolated in the deep quarters of the field, Eric Murray does have a tendency to break down. And, it's one of those things. You do not want to see Eric Murray matched up with Xavier Worthy one-on-one. They cannot allow that matchup to happen. They have to do something about that. If it were me, this would be the game where I would actually use Derek Stingley to shadow Xavier Worthy. Keep Kamari Lassiter locked up on DeAndre Hopkins or Juju Smith-Schuster out there. And I would prefer Lassiter to go with DeAndre Hopkins, who's a bigger wide receiver. He has a bigger frame. He goes after those 50-50 balls a lot more consistently. So Kamari Lassiter is the guy that would match up well with D-Hop. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, Kalen Bullock and Miles Bryant can very effectively take care of him. You could use our linebackers to cover those tight ends without any problem. And the Texans will probably look to play more their 4-3 approach. The one thing the Chiefs didn't have a lot of success doing was running the football. They were not able to get that football up between the tackles whatsoever. A lot of times when the Chiefs did get any type of running plays that went for positive yardage, it was just the Texans did not tackle well. The Texans have to be able to do a better job of wrapping up and securing tackles this game if they want any chance to win this whatsoever. And the Texans, you cannot start slow in this game. They started fast in that last game against the Chiefs. They got scores. They have to start fast. They have to get points on the board. And most importantly, they have to be more efficient in the red zone. We can't settle for field goals here. They have to be able to get that ball in there. And what I would do is, in the red zone, give it to Joe Mixon more. Don't just run them one time and then throw 3 consecutive passes or 2 consecutive passes and kick a field goal. Give Joe Mixon a chance to get that ball in the end zone. The Texans have got to find a way to get this offensive line going Chris Jones is going to be a lot more difficult challenge for the Texans' offensive line in between the tackles than Puna Ford. So the Texans do have the players to do this. They do have a very, very good matchup. And I look to see the Texans win this game and upset the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I look at it as a score of, I would probably say 19-14. So that is it for Mello Mike and the Bull Bash. Please do me a favor, help me support the channel. Like, subscribe, leave your comments here. And we're going to ask a question to Texans fans. That question is, how do you feel about this Texans defense matching up against that Chiefs offense? Let me know down in the comment section. Thank you guys, and we'll see you later.